of all, this book called 1 Million Climate Jobs. Some of you will be familiar with it, some of you possibly not. It's a third edition now, and the point behind it really is to say that there are positive alternatives. We've been hearing, all the dreadful things that conventional energy is actually doing to people and to the planet. And very often the question we're asked is, yes, well, what's your solution? And we know there are solutions, but the other question we're asked is, well, won't you be losing jobs if the oil industry shuts down? I campaign against the third runway at Heathrow Airport, as some of you will know. And the question we get is, well, if the third runway is not there, won't we lose jobs? If people move from air to rail, what about the jobs? And it's a legitimate question, because people are struggling to get jobs. People hold on to the jobs they've got. Many people don't have choices as to whether they work in clean or dirty industries. People want jobs to provide for themselves, for their families, for their partners. And so that was one of the reasons behind originally producing this booklet, to say, yes, there is an answer to both the jobs crisis that we face, the austerity crisis that we face. There's an answer to the austerity crisis and to the climate crisis we face. And that is to invest, not just in clean energy, but to invest in cleaner forms of transport, for example. So what we're saying in this booklet, just to give you one example, is that if there was a scaling down of the aviation industry, not the abolition of it, but the scaling down of it, if there was the scaling down of the amount of car use we have, not getting rid of cars, but a scaling down, and a consequent investment in public transport, in expanding our buses and our trains and our walking and our cycling, then actually, although you're losing jobs in some industries, you're actually gaining jobs in others. And the details of the booklet shows with some very, really detailed figures that we can create at least 1 million climate jobs. It is a catchy slogan, but it's more than that. Jonathan Neal, who's the main author of the booklet, has worked out in detail how that can actually happen. And if you do want to buy a booklet, you can read it on the way home tonight. Well, you've had a long day. Tomorrow morning. Listen, just one other thing I wanted to say before I sit down. Campaigning Against Climate Change, as some of you know, is coordinating a march, what we call the Time to Act March on Climate Change, on March the 7th. It's building on the fantastic marches that there were in London and New York and around the country in September. And what we want to do is build on that and try to, and it's deliberately set for March for two reasons. One, well, maybe a third reason, March and March, but that wasn't, we weren't careful enough to think about that at the time, but we'll add to that other reason. But the other two reasons were, as we know, there's a general election coming up in May, and what we want to try and do is raise even further the whole idea of climate change in advance of the election. We are not naive enough to believe that whatever the result of the election, we're suddenly going to see big changes in climate change policy. But that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't use the opportunity to raise the profile of climate change. So that's what's been done in March. And the other reason it's been done in 2015 is, as most of you will know, the big COP talks in Paris, the climate change talks in Paris, are taking place at the end of the year, and whichever government does win the election will clearly be going to represent the UK in those talks. Again, we possibly don't have great faith that in those talks there will be suddenly a revolutionary change in climate change policy, but we do feel that both the election and the climate change talks, we really do need to raise the profile of climate change, show to politicians that it's not a minority interest. Show to politicians that there is real concern across the country about climate change. I mean, I think that's coming through in a number of the campaigns that we've been hearing about today, in fracking, in some of the other campaigns. When people are asked, they're concerned. And we want to try and demonstrate that by getting as many people onto the streets as possible. On March the 7th, it will be in central London. You can get the details on our climate change, www.climate. Can you remember?
Climate change.
Next one. Look at the climate change website. Get the details on that. Come along to the march, but we're also very keen. It's not just a campaign against climate change march. We're simply coordinating it and encouraging other organisations to get involved, other individuals to get involved, both in the planning of it, in the logistics of it, and in making it as creative as possible. We want it to be more than a march. We want it to be a creative celebration of what the world could be like if we weren't threatened by climate change. We're organising meetings. Again, the details are on our website. It'd be great to see you there. It'd be great to see you on March the 7th. As you say, March the 7th. Thanks very much. £2.50. Just £2.50. You get back to them. Thanks very much.
Do we have a speaker from Fuel Poverty Action?